All right, small businesses, TOT.
Yes.
Looking at that particular tax, first of all, also the suggestion that it should be moved from 1% to 3%. The initial statement there,
yes,
that it was to incentivize small businesses to pay their taxes. Do you think some of these proposals in the Finance Bill 2023 will derail that?
Yes, for sure. Because though if we can start back, it is not the first time that the turnover tax will be levied and taxed at a rate of 3%. It was actually at 3% before COVID. It is the then President Uhuru Kenyatta who decided that it was wise to cushion the small business traders from the adverse effects of COVID. And that's when the tax rate was lowered from 3% to 1%. Now, during that time, actually, the many small business traders had been able to voluntarily and register themselves within that the tax bracket, and they were filing the returns because it was not 1% of the gross sales that they were making was not considered as a very harsh tax rate for them. But right now that it has been proposed to be taken back to 3%, now we are likely to see small business traders not complying with the filing of taxes, because it is the 3% actually is being levied not on profit but on gross sales. So if a company profit margin is less than 10%, actually at the end of the day, that company will not be able to make any profits, because the turnover tax, unlike the income, the corporate tax regime, the turnover tax is charged on the gross sales. But the company still has a choice. There's no company that is mandated to use the turnover regime. It can choose either to use the turnover tax regime or to use the corporate tax regime. So it is a choice that the company has to make. However, small, medium enterprises, they prefer turnover tax, because that one, turnover tax is not as complicated when it comes to complying with it as in the case of corporate tax.
Okay, that's quite interesting, and I want to bring in Ramogi. I mean, this notion that if the government holds to its guns on this issue of turnover tax, I mean, lowering that band, it means more businesses will be included. Now, looking at it from the perspective of the government, do you feel they are justified, especially at a time that resources are needed, and this is just one of the chess moves they need to make sure they raise those resources?
Well, the government is trying to look for money, revenue from every corner. I've seen they've gone for digital tax, and they realized that there's non-compliance when they took the housing tax, the rent tax high, so they've brought it down to at least win over compliance, because it was a bit complicated to try and chase landlords across towns for their compliance. Voluntary compliance around that would be easier. And now they've gone for the small player, the small business. You know, when you say 500,000, it sounds like that person is making a lot of money. But 500,000 is someone who is making less than 50,000 per month. It could be around 40,000 thereabouts, or 45. And that means that they are making, say, 1,000, 1,500 a month. That could be the water vendor, the mkokoteni guy. It could be Mama Mboga. It could be the guy selling maize. It could be anyone, because 1,500 a day could even be the mama cooking at a construction site. That's a bit too low. So even though, yes, I agree that the government needs to do all effort to get revenue, I think they have come too low, and they have the hustler is now being targeted, as it were. I wish they maintained it at 1 million and, of course, raised the percentage to 3%. And as the doc has rightly mentioned, given people the choice of whether to go for corporate tax or turnover tax. But 500,000 is a bit too low.
And still on the finance bill, some key industry players also chipped in on MARTA's proposition of raising the VAT on fuel, and this is the Petroleum Outlets Association of Kenya. This is what they had to say in regards to this proposal.
An additional tax on the petroleum borders on immorality. This proposal would see Kenyans buy petrol at almost 200 shillings a litre. Two, as an industry, an increase in VAT would force us to inject more capital to run the business. Now, petroleum business operates under the margins that are also regulated by EPRA. These margins, which were set in 2019, have been hit by dramatic shocks over the period. The rise of global fuel prices and a depreciating shilling, which has increased the cost of petroleum products by over 70% from 2019. The subsidy on petroleum products, which has been supported by industry, support which is largely financial and comes at a heavy cost, has further negatively impacted on the same margins. General rise in the cost of operational expenses like finance cost, electricity, transport, and staff cost have again impacted on our margins. Our margins are simply not enough to support supply of petroleum products in the country. They need to be reviewed urgently to reflect the actual cost of supply.
All right, Dr. Kamau, fuel runs the country. I know there's a musician when I was younger, he sang that mapenzi yanaran dunia, but it can't run your tractor, food production, transport. So talk to me about, these are industry players, talking about cost of fuel on Kenyans, but also on their businesses it will be devastating. Do you feel the government should take some of these concerns seriously?
That's for sure, because actually increasing cost of fuel through imposition of VAT on fuel is actually very regressive. And I say it is very regressive because of this. Let's have an example about a person who earns a salary of 20,000. And he spends 100 on a daily basis to go to Nairobi, to CBD, and 100 to go back. So that's 200 per day. In a month, that is 200 times 30, that is 6,000. So it means 6,000 divided by 20,000, this person is incurring 30% of his income is being spent on transport. Assuming that another person who is being paid 100,000 is incurring the same amount of money, 6,000. So this person is incurring 6,000 divided by 100,000. It is the cost of transport is 6% of his total income. Now, let's say now we have introduced VAT. And because of VAT, this transport of 100 shillings one way has been increased to 150. So two-way is 300. Now, again, we go to the same mathematics. 300 times 30 to see how much this person is spending per month. 300 times 30 is 9,000. Let's call it 10,000. So this person who is earning 20,000 now is 50% of his income is being spent on transport. This other person is still spending 10,000, the one who is being paid 100,000. So it's 10,000 over 100,000. The person who is earning higher is now the percentage of transport on income that is generating is 10%. So after the increase of the price of the fuel, after imposing VAT, for the person who is earning higher, it has moved from 6% to 10%, just 4%. But this other one has moved from 30% to 50%. So when we increase the cost of fuel after imposing the VAT, the person who suffers the most is the hustler, the person who is at the bottom of the pyramid. The person who is at the top of the pyramid will not feel so much heat.
Exactly.
So that's why I call it is quite regressive.
Yeah. Ramogi, will the G2G fuel importation, because we're trying to figure ourselves around the nuances that are impacting the fuel sector. With this VAT proposition and the challenge with the dollar, all that, isn't it just mounting more pressure on the fuel sector in this country?
It is. I'm glad you brought up the G2G arrangement, because on one hand, the government has outdone itself with a very innovative solution, going to the oil sellers and just having that arrangement. We anticipated that it would push down the pressure on the dollar, so the value of the shilling would not be affected as much, and the price, the forex would correct itself to a normal 120, maybe 115. And at the same time, the price of oil would fall significantly, because now at least there is some stability around that, and the currency translation costs have been managed. But at the same time, someone once said that the government giveth, what the government giveth with the right hand, it taketh with the left. And so now they have increased the price of fuel through the VAT increment by 8%, because it was 8%, now it's going to be 16%. If I had the opportunity to advise the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, I would say retain the 8%. And I would also tell the President, let's not, because his ambition was to remove the VAT altogether. I would tell the President, let's not remove the VAT, retain the 8%, and by it, at least ensure that there is some money circulating in the economy. People have disposable income with which to spend, and that way you safeguard growth, economic growth, while at the same time you make sure that government revenue is assured. But that seems like my advice would not have gotten through, because they have opted for revenue, and really without giving input or much thought about consumption, about growth, about disposable income. And that will affect us. As my colleague has mentioned, there are some proposals that are very progressive. The 35%, that's progressive. I mean, if you're earning over 500,000, give us more taxes. That's just rational. But this other one, I think it's a bit retrogressive, and it's going to affect us in a negative way.
All right. Wow, gentlemen, Odhiambo Ramogi, despite being under the weather, you have risen above the storm. And thank you for joining with us through this show, and thank you for your input. Also, we have Dr. Alex Kamau, our business consultant. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your input on BizChat. My request to my director was to play that song, The Emperor, the Conqueror is Here. Am I getting my request, or am I being denied? Okay, she says that my time is out. You see? The Lord is watching you. But thank you very much for joining with us. I'm Noah Kipkemboy. Enjoy the rest of your viewing, your weekend, and see you next week.